Before we get started, please remember this podcast is for general educational purposes only. We're not providing medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult your own healthcare provider about your care. Welcome to Fertility Nurses Unfiltered. 2 nurses, 1 mic, no bullshit.
I'm Ashlee LaRue, fertility nurse and founder of Fertilities.
And I'm Laura Wepler, fertility nurse and founder of Navigating Fertility with Laura.
You got questions, the internet has a lot of opinions, but what you really need is 2 fertility nurses who aren't afraid to tell the truth.
No scripts, no sugarcoating, just honest, evidence-based nurse-to-nurse conversation. So let's get into it.
Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's episode of Fertility Nurses Unfiltered. As always, Laura and I are super excited to be with you this week and really excited to be talking about this week's topic. We're going to be talking about single parenthood by choice. And our guest today is a good friend of mine, a local REI here in Nashville, where you all know I'm located. And she's actually a single mom by choice. So the perfect person, the perfect blend of both the clinical and personal side of this journey. So really excited to dive into talking with her today. But to give her a formal introduction that she deserves, our guest today is Dr. Meggie Smith. Dr. Smith is a board-certified reproductive endocrinologist and infertility specialist at Nashville Fertility Center. She earned her BA in chemistry from NYU, medical degree from NYU School of Medicine, and completed her OBGYN residency at NYU before pursuing her fellowship in reproductive endocrinology and infertility at the University of Southern California Keck School of Medicine, where she also served as a clinical instructor. She's a published researcher with work in fertility and sterility and the Journal of Assisted Reproduction and Genetics. And Dr. Smith's expertise spans lab technique optimization, ICSI timing, and the intersection of social media and healthcare, which you know we all love. She has received multiple awards, including the Frank Lynch Memorial Essay Award from the Pacific Coast Obstetrical and Gynecological Society. Dr. Smith is a member of ASRM and SREI and is deeply committed to individualized, compassionate fertility care. In her not so spare time, she's a marathoner and, of course, a single mom by choice. So, Dr. Smith, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you guys for having me. Yes, I'm very excited to talk with you guys, and thanks for all you're doing in this space, because always needed to have things like things to refer patients to that are legit and not, TikTok.
Yeah. Not TikTok. Yes.
Not that this TikTok's bad, but it serves its purpose, but maybe not for fertility. Some fertility information depending on who you're getting it from.
Yeah.
So
No, absolutely. No, we absolutely appreciate you being here and excited for this conversation. But I guess to kick things off, if you don't mind just sharing in your own words a little bit about yourself, how you got started in this, and then we can, as much as you would like to share about your own kind of personal journey and how that webs into professional.
Yes. So I did a 1-week REI rotation when I was a 3rd-year medical student, and I really liked it. I actually that's where I met I call her like my life mentor, Dr. Jamie Notman, on that 1 week, which is kind of crazy. And then she really shepherded me through my first research projects, how to match into fellowship, and just all kinds of stuff. And so that's kind of where I first got exposed and got interested. And then, throughout residency, really, still remained interested in that, because sometimes, you go into residency and your priorities shift, or you get interested in something else. And so that's really the exposure, the early exposure to it was very, very helpful. I don't know how I ever would have otherwise known this is what I would have wanted to do. And so, yeah, after being in that world for a long time and just, to match in fellowship, you have to pursue research and kind of be connected and whatnot. So that is how I got into it. And Jamie was a great mentor. And, we run, so we had a lot in common. And then in terms of yes, I currently practice. I'm a partner at Nashville Fertility Center. I have a 2.5-year-old. She'll be 3 in September. And I'm currently pregnant with my 2nd daughter, who is due in mid-August. So yes, and when people ask me how these children came to be, I'm like, oh, it's a whole long, I was like, it's not a long story, but I can blow their minds that these are, from my 31-year-old frozen eggs that were frozen in California when I was a fellow, and then, flown to Nashville. I'm like, it's not, because then people are like, oh, is it the same dad? I'm like, oh yeah. Or do you know the gender? Yeah, I do. So yes, so hopefully that kind of and yes, and otherwise my spare time is not as much anymore, but I do like to exercise a lot, and yeah, that's pretty much that's like my social life and like extracurricular activity now whenever I have time. So
I love it. So you run marathons?
I did. Not anymore. I did. Yeah, I have. I think the last one I did was in 2022, right before I got pregnant with my daughter. And I've done a half marathon since she's been born. It just, the time, I'd rather run like 3 to 5 miles than,
Yeah.
just like, you got to get a babysitter for 3, and then you got to parent the rest of the day. It's just too, I was like, well, there'll be a time for that. There'll be a time. Not
takes up
now.
a lot of time to train for a marathon.
Yeah.
A lot of time. And I was like, that's just not something I'm, have the time for right now. Nor do I have really an interest, because toddlers are exhausting enough. So there's that. Yeah.
I'm super curious hearing your story and how you got into, being a reproductive endocrinology and infertility specialist. When you went to medical school, did you even know that this was a field that existed? I feel like when I went to nursing school, I had no idea that this was a thing that you could do.
No, I had no idea this existed. Or I had no idea it was really a thing. I was on my OBGYN rotation. I thought I wanted to be a dermatologist when I went to medical school. And I will say, like, I don't really know how you know what you want to do unless you've really been exposed to it.
Yeah.
But all that to say was, during my OBGYN rotation, I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. I like this. But I was like, ugh, like, do I want to get up all the time at night? Like, it's hard, And so I was like, gosh, I don't know if I can do that and have all these other interests that I have. And then honestly, the reason I did the week of the REI rotation was everyone was like, well, you get Friday off, because all the attending at that time at NYU, where I did medical school, all of the doctors, they were off on Fridays, and they had a fill-in doctor, or not a fill-in doctor, like she only was there to cover on Fridays. And so the fellows were like, you don't have to be here, you can go home, And so I was like, oh, sweet, that's awesome. So that's why I did it. But then I really liked the, like, kind of the thing that makes you like it is now the thing that you're like, oh, now I don't say it drives you crazy, but like, it's like the catch-22 of it all, that like you get to be with people through a very like intense time of their life. You form you form very close relationships often with your patients, and you're with them through like a very trying time of their life, like, no pun intended. And like walking them through, a lot of uncertainty and shame and guilt and all of it. And I was like, and I thought that, I was like, it's so rewarding, which yes, it is. Although now, on the flip side, I will say, like, that is one of the harder, at some point, like, we don't have there's not an answer for everything. And that's a hard pill to swallow, as a patient, of like, well, gosh, we don't know why this transfer didn't work. Like, no one knows, and so why this euploid embryo transfer didn't work. And so that can also, like, the thing that you're like, oh, this is going to be really rewarding to walk people through all of this. And it's like, oh gosh, it's also like the hardest thing too, that you're like, gosh, I wish I had the answers, but I don't, so.
Yeah. Do you feel like it made it, I guess, both sides? We've talked about this, having sort of our own fertility journeys in our own respects, but then also being on the clinical side. Do you think that being in the field made it an easier patient or harder patient experience, or?
Well, okay, so I always caveat this for people that ask me. I'm like, it's a very different experience, because I never tried to get pregnant, so I'm not coming with that trauma, and I never had like a miscarriage or like repeated miscarriages or anything, so I'm not coming from it from like a trauma based, like, I do think it made it easier, because I think it made it easier in some respects, in that that everyone's trying their best, they're trying to make this work, like, like, sometimes I have to remind patients, like, we are trying to get you pregnant. Like, that's our goal here. Like, I'm not trying to hide anything, but I think at the end, it, like, yeah, it made it kind of, I think I also knew from being on the clinical side that the saddest patients I see are the patients who don't like the options that they have.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so I tell people, like, I still have embryos. I have frozen eggs. I have an extra vial of sperm. I made the decision to make embryos from my 31-year-old eggs, but kept the 33-year-olds frozen when I was 36, because I was like, well, if these don't do well, I'm still young enough to cycle again. And, so I think that knowing, like, how to plan and stuff made it very easy. And also that, like, it's not 100%. Like, at the end, like, and like, even when I went into my second transfer, I told people, I said, look, like, I could transfer the rest of the embryos I have and I never get pregnant again, but like, I feel very lucky with what I got. So I think that also, like, helps, I guess, in a sense of being like, okay, like, I'm very fortunate. Yes, I knew I would regret if I didn't try, but I know well enough that, like, it may not work and I'm going to have to be okay with that, like, accept the work. I think the other part of, like, I'd already accepted, quote, the worst thing that could happen, which for me was the worst thing that could happen, was not having children one day. And so then once you'd accepted, like, I tell people, like, the stages of grief, I talk about it a lot. I'm like, once we move to acceptance, it's a lot easier. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right now we're bargaining, or we're angry. I learned that from the Jamies, Jamie Notman and Jamie
Yes.
Walsh.
She
Yes.
yes. I
Stages
know
of
it
grief
well.
all the time. But I'm like, I had already accepted that, like, okay, if I don't ever have children, I can be a great aunt. I can be a great, someone for someone else's kids or whatever else. Like, so I think once I'd accepted the worst thing, it made it easier to accept that it may not work, at some point. So, yeah. I guess that, I don't know if that answers the question, but
No, it
No,
does.
I think
absolutely.
I think it helped. I think it helped knowing that, like, I think also for patients, the loss of control in fertility is really hard. And I think knowing that, like, if that's just the reality of it, was like,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, that at the end of the day, we're all trying our best. And so that, again, like, I think it made a lot of the uncertainty and the loss of control a much easier pill to swallow, knowing that that's just how it has to be.
Yeah. I'm curious on your decision to be a single mom by choice, is I think that is something that we're seeing more and more, and it's so empowering that women are like, I don't need a man. I don't need to wait
Mhm.
for, like, Mr. Right. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna do this. And, like, I would love to hear kind of your thoughts behind that decision.
Oh, well, I actually just have to say, you would think this would not be true, but moving to Tennessee and, like, starting to practice here, I saw more and more women who would come to me in their early 30s saying, well, I'm just ready to have a baby. I'm going to do it on my own. I was like, well, are you sure you don't want to freeze some eggs? Like, you're 32. And they'd be like, no, I'm ready to do it. And I was like, okay, like, we can freeze some eggs and buy you some time. They're like, no, I don't. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so, single mother by choice, I saw much more here than I probably did in New York or LA at the time.
That's interesting.
And
That is interesting.
yes, because I think more people in New York are like, because people get married there later, right, than in Tennessee. And so I think, a lot of people, when you're 32, your friends maybe already married and have kids, and, and you're like, well, I want to be in the same kind of, like, situation or same phase of life as my friends. So let me just do this now. And so that was kind of like, I remember, like, wow, that's interesting. I would have not thought this to be the case here. Like, people were less interested in freezing eggs sometimes. I mean, there's still a good population of people that egg freeze, but, like, I was just kind of shocked sometimes at how young people were. And then so that's kind of how I'd, like, decided, like, was like, oh, maybe I should, like, take this next step. And then the other thing, when I got to so I had my first daughter when I was 37, and I was starting to get to the age where people get divorced. And not, like, jokingly, but I think I started to see the perspective. My mom used to tell me this a lot when I was, like, younger and sad about not being married or whatever. And she's like, Meggie, there are much worse things in life than not being married. And I didn't understand that until I got to, like, my late 30s, and I saw people getting divorced, and that's really hard, or they married someone kind of solely for the purpose, not solely, but they felt that pressure to have
Yeah.
kids. And also by virtue of the work that I do, I am like a part-time marriage therapist counselor. And
Yeah.
you see that, like, I mean, you have the patient who comes back who tells you, oh, I found out my husband was cheating on me the whole time, and all these horrible things that you're like, oh my God. Like, or like when you're like, oh, that's awful. Or when like couples are clearly not on the same page about having kids. And that's a huge, so I was like, gosh, there really are worse things than not being. And the other conclusion I kind of came to was like, I'm either going to get children or a marriage, but probably not both in the quote traditional timeline. And one do have a little bit more control over actually than the other, because it's not dependent on the person necessarily. Yeah. And I also knew like I wanted to have kids in a certain time frame of my life. And, maybe if I ever met people are like, oh, do you want to get married? Are you dating? And it's like, I'm not opposed to the idea at all, but like this person's going to really have to add value to my life. Like they cannot take away from, I was like, and so I came to the conclusion that you have to make, I tell patients this a lot. I'm like, life is about choices at some point. And so we have to just make choices and realize that that's, that we're going to then have to live by those. And, the other thing, I was like, gosh, it would be nice to have another co-parent, but it would be harder to have someone that I'm resenting, because I'm like, remember when Scout was really young, one day I was home, like really, early postpartum, and I was like, gosh, it'd be really nice to have someone else to change a diaper. But then I thought to myself, what would be worse is me having to say, hey, can you change this diaper, and resenting them for not doing, I was like, that would actually be worse. So yeah, that's kind of where I was like, at some point I was like, okay, you're either going to do it or you're not. And then I'll tell you, since I've done it, people are like, I wish I did what you did. That is so, or like that they got, especially if they've gotten divorced. And, the hard part about that is like, if it's not amicable or really, you're not on the same, like, that's really tough. And so and also I think the other expectation that is when you're going into having children as part of a married couple or a partner relationship, that's how you're going into having children. Whereas I tell people, I went into this knowing it's only me. So I've got to set up a system. Like single parenthood I knew was going to be my reality. And I think that would be very, very hard to go from, I'm in a partner relationship, I have a co-parent in this, to now I don't, so there's pros and cons to everything, A second income would be nice, just because my only childcare hack is money. But I was like, that would be nice. But, at the end of the day, the other thing too, when you talk to moms, they're like, yeah, my husband's great, but I do, they're always like, but, who's thinking of the birthday presents and the this and the play dates and all of that? And I'm like, yeah. So at the end of the day, women do a lot. And anyways. So.
Yeah. I mean, we can all agree. I mean, it's so wonderful that we have fertility treatment options for single parenthood by choice, that we have this option as single moms, single dads, to have that family without having to have that pressure of finding somebody and, all those things, and sort of flip the script a little bit. So empowering, so amazing. And I'm so glad that you've gotten the response that you've had and you've been seeing it more, because sometimes I feel like a lot of times you hear a lot of the negative and a lot of stigma around like, oh, how could you do that and not have, oh, you need the male component, or you need the, dad component in the scenario. And it's like, can we not?
I mean, I always tell people like LeBron James was raised by a single mom, and so was Justin Timberlake. Okay, so like I think they did okay.
I like that.
Like listen, I think they did fine for themselves. Well, yeah, I was actually very worried about, and my parents were actually very worried about like the commentary from people. So I did not put my pregnancy with Scout on social media at all until I had the baby.
Yeah.
And I was like, had a baby, plot twist, mostly because I didn't want any, and I was like, once they're here, they can't say anything, but I'll have to say people have been overwhelmingly positive. There are maybe 1 to 2, like a handful of people who've been like, well, doesn't she want to be with someone? And I was like, I mean, but not just a body, not just a warm body, like again, so yeah, I think the other thing I always thought about too is like my grandmother, for instance, on my mom's side. So she divorced, like she she divorced after my mom graduated high school. And she said, she was like, I'm never getting remarried. Like the only reason I understand people have to do for financial reasons, but she was fortunate not to have to do that. And she was like, I just thought about how her life was so different because, like, I don't think she could have her own credit card. I'm pretty sure she had to have someone else co-sign her.
Right.
Like, there are all these things. I could own a home. I can have my own credit card. I can have my own career and do all these things that were not available to women as, you know, as just in my grandmother's generation. Like, you had to get married. You had, like, this was the only, like, there was no, you know, I mean, I'm sure there were other people out there that did, but that was, especially in the South, that was not, you know, so I'm like, I feel very fortunate that I live in a day and age where I have the choice to do that, you know, and have the ability and the choice to do that without feeling like I have to enter a bad marriage or have to live you know, have to do something that is not going to be beneficial to me or beneficial to the child at the end of the day. Like, when people come to me and I'm like, a loved child, that's all. However the child is loved, you know, by whomever, that kid's going to be fine, you know, whether it's, and I always, like, I have a lot of caregivers and a lot of help, and Scout goes to daycare, and I'm like, you know, the more people that love my child, and, you know, the better, you know. You know, I'm like, it's just going to benefit her. So that I think, because you do have to rely on a lot of help if you're doing this alone, clearly, especially if you're working full time. And so, like, there is always that, like, sometimes if your kid is like, oh, so excited to see, so, you know, they're like, not prefer, but sometimes they'll, you know, they don't know, they're little, and they'll be like, oh, Miss Allie, I want Miss Allie to do this or whatever. And you're like, oh, why not Mom? But then you're like, you know what? It's great that she loves this person and this person loves her, because Mom's got to work, you know, too. Like, so it's like, okay, it's good. Like, she still loves me, and it's good that she loves other people too, and other people love her. So
it's just kind of, I think that's just kids too in general, right? Like, my kids,
I remember when I was pregnant with my second, and my first kiddo didn't want anything to do with me. He just wanted dad. And I remember, like, getting in the car, driving to a parking lot, and just sobbing because I was like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean?
Oh, kids play you. They play you.
Totally.
Yes. Yeah. Like, this morning I was totally gaslit by my daughter, like, several times, you know, like, or like, she said she wanted a bagel with the pink cream cheese, like strawberry cream cheese. Then I bring it to her, and she's like, not this one. And I was like, you know, so you want the white cream cheese? Okay. Then I bring it on the rainbow plate. Not the rainbow plate, the blue plate. I'm like, okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah, you know, so, but then at school, I'll be like, oh, and then she didn't want to put on socks today. And I was like, fine, wear shoes without socks. You know, I'll put the socks in your backpack. And so I get there and I go, just so you guys know, the socks are in her backpack in case she needs to put them on at some point. And she goes, I want to put socks on. And I'm like, yeah, or like letting them do her hair, like all this stuff. They play the parent more so because they know they can. You know, whereas like bedtime, if I have someone who does help me and they're like, oh yeah, just put her in the bed. I'm like, you just put her in the bed and that like worked? Yeah. I was like, oh no, we have to like do a whole, like, her new thing is I need medicine. And so I have gummy prenatal vitamins. So I gave her some one time. So I was like, what medicine am I going to give you when you don't need medicine? And now that was a bad idea, because now she's like, I need medicine. And I was like,
she's taking prenatal vitamins.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I was like, ooh, I should have like come up with something else. But I was like, I guess there's worse things here, you know. So yeah.
True. Definitely. That's so adorable. Are you nervous about having the second? Like, what was the decision to like, okay, I've done this once. Is it harder to like plan for the second and to like do that all again? Like,
so when you go when you go to it for the first time, you really don't, like, no one can tell you until you do it. Like, that's what, like, I babysat a lot, nannied a lot. So there were certain realities about having kids that I, you know, understood. Like, you can't turn them off. It's not a book you can put down. It's a very full time, and like, they're gonna whine or cry. Like, there's certain they're gonna have a tantrum. Like, this is true. But there are certain things, like, no one can tell you about the exhaustion and all that, and like, until you do it. Because I thought, like, I did OB/GYN residency. I'm It's like, even with that and having lots and lots of help, like, it's still exhausting.
It's a
And
different
so
type. It's a different type of exhaustion.
it's a different type. Yes. It's just I do tell people like the first year of Scout's life, I felt like was the most intense thing I ever did. Because also the first year, it's always changing. So I think, but I never really, I always said, well, people always say, how many kids do you want to have? I was like, well, let me just start with one and see how this goes, because like, who knows? She could have had special needs or something that really required a lot of my time. And then having a second kid wouldn't have been a prudent decision or whatever. So, but I also knew like at some point, if I didn't do it, if I got too far out of the baby stage, I was not going to go back, would be way too hard. And I just never envisioned myself as a one kid person. Like, I don't know. I just couldn't like see that. So I was like, you know what, let me try. A lot of people are like, are you crazy to try and have another one? And I was like, I realize I'm going from a man-to-man to zone defense, but also like, yeah. But at the end of the day, like I was like, it's going to be very hard for the next 2 years will be very chaotic, just because, but I was like, then eventually they go to school. Eventually, they're all potty trained. Like, and I have a sister. I love having a sister. And this is a little bit morbid, but I was like, I won't be here forever, and so, for them to have somebody else or they can commiserate about me one day together, like, her mom is like crazy. So yeah, I was like, at the end of the day, if it never worked, I was like, I tried. Or like, I don't know, I was like, I'm not going to go through like heroic efforts to have a second kid, but let me try. And if it works, great. But like, if it's like I have a fibroid, that I was like, if I have to have like a myomectomy, and then I was like, then I'd probably just be like, no, that's a big surgery to recover from. Then you got to heal and all this stuff. I'd be like, okay, maybe not. We'll just keep going, live our life. So yeah, I'm a little well, I would say like, am I nervous? I think like you just don't know until it happens. You're like, you can prepare as much and then it's like the shit's gonna hit the fan at some point. But I do think I have a better sense of like my actual needs for childcare and whatnot than I did going into the first one. The biggest thing that I did this time is I booked a night nurse for 12 weeks, because for 5 nights a week, which is a huge luxury. However, I was like, if I can sleep, you can tolerate a lot, during the day.
Yeah.
But I was like, if you are sleep deprived, everything is 10 times worse. So going into having a second kid, I was like, okay, the thing that I'm going to have to save up for is this night nurse, because that is going to be my saving grace. And if I can sleep, I can do, can take pretty much about anything the rest of the day. So that, and then actually I had like a baby sprinkle or whatever. And I was like, people don't bring gifts to this, right? And my friend was like, well, they'll want to bring something. I was like, here's what we're going to do. Night nurse fund. I was like,
that's a good idea.
Donate to the night nurse fund. That's all I want. I already have all the stuff. Like, just give me money for the night nurse. That's it. And yeah, someone was like, good for you for asking what you wanted. I was like, I'm just make it easy on people, Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm a little nervous, but I'm also like, I think also this time knowing it ends at some point. Like, you're like, they aren't a newborn forever.
Yeah.
They're a baby forever. And they're not, she won't be a toddler forever. So you're like, it ends at some point too. You do sleep. They sleep, that type of thing.
Eventually.
I think talking about like a support system in a fertility journey is super important in general, right? Like just having people around you that can support you. But I think in this scenario, right, it's a little different. I think you have to be a little bit more forward thinking too, like you're talking about. And again, you might not know till you know, but it's like, what did that support? Sounds like you have family. I mean, I know this, but you have family nearby and things like that support. But like, what did your support system look like? And I guess like advice we could give to other people that are considering single parenthood, like what's the best advice you can give for that sort of support system if you are thinking of navigating it?
You need a bench of people is what you need, a lineup of people that are, so I think like what the best childcare solution is, like the best one that's going to work for you. I did think for me, like I put my daughter Scout on daycare wait list before I did my transfer. And I tell patients to do that too. I'm like, look, if there's any benefit from this, is that you can get on a daycare wait list early, because that is the Hunger Games. And the reason I did that was because I was like, for daycare, my nephews go to one. And I was like, well, I don't have to organize the activities that they're going to do. Like that takes that off of me. And aside from, of course, like snow days and school closures, like it's reliable 6:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Of course, I think the biggest thing I was worried about was like them getting sick during the day and what was I going to do? And now having done this for 3 years, I realized you can have backup plan. At some point, the shit hits the fan, and then your child's just going to have to come work with you, or you just cancel patients that day. You will figure it out. So for the first year, I realized I needed kind of someone to help me with my stuff too, along with the baby, because you cannot do it all, like especially in those early months in the first year. So I needed someone that would be able to help with me. And I was so nervous about the like, what happens if I get a call at work and she's sick? And so I had a family assistant who came to my house from like 10 to 3, did the laundry, cleaned the house, picked up groceries, did this stuff, took the dog, like ran errands and did all this stuff for me. And then was like backup call for if my daughter got sick, because that's like the bulk of the day. And then kind of as she started getting closer to 1 or so, I realized actually like the day sometimes you're going to get called that they're sick. But like, what if they're out of town, or what if they're doing, they're not available? So I realized actually having morning and night help was a lot what I liked. And I actually liked having someone really early in the morning so I could go work out and then come back and get ready and have someone help. And then the evening too, where you're like just trying to do all the things, eat dinner, clean up, bath, bed. It's like, yes. So I think the first thing is like to have multiple people. Like I tell people I have a list of people that I use I don't rely on just one person, because, someone might be busy or they're sick or they're on vacation. So I have like a list of babysitters and other people. And I'm very fortunate that they'll also do extra stuff for me too, like help with laundry, help with this, help with, all that kind of stuff. So I think just realizing like you need like, it really does take a village, and that you just need to have a lot, like a bench of people that are willing to help you out. And once you do, I think just having options, and then also realizing at some point, like you're going to have options and they're all going to fail and it'll work itself out. It'll be fine. Yeah.
Taking a little bit of a step back on, when you were making the decision to, it sounds like thaw your eggs and create embryos and, proceed forward. Can you talk us through a little bit about like the decision-making process around like choosing a sperm donor? Like, did you use a known donor? Did you use a bank? Like, what was that like?
Yes, I used an anonymous donor. Yeah, I don't even think I've ever thought about using a known donor, to be honest. I just knew that was like more time. I don't know, time consuming. Like, I also didn't feel the need to have like a relationship with this person at all. That was just me personally. I happened to be choosing a sperm donor around the same time I was buying a house. And my realtor said to me, like, okay, with the house, you're going to be about 85% happy. You need to make your list of negotiables and non-negotiables. And that is how I counsel patients about sperm, like egg or sperm donors, is you're going to be about 85% happy. And there's no perfect donor. I think a lot of people like going, oh, I'm choosing a donor, I'm going to find it's going to be the perfect thing for me. It's like, that just does not exist, because the other hard part about it is like the vials can sometimes go really fast and you're like, oh God, they're already so it's like kind of pressure. But I had like other people look at it too, to like, cause then you're like, am I overanalyzing this or whatever? And I had one of my coworkers like look at it and she was like, yeah, he seems pretty good. And then the other thing too, I realized about myself is I did not want to see adult pictures, because most kids are cute. And then adulthood, they maybe have let themselves go. We don't know, you never know. And the other thing too is like personality can make or break people so much. So I remember like two of my friends actually said this to me. They're like, do you think I would pick my husband on a sperm donor website? He's bald, or whatever. Like, and I was like, yeah, but like, they're like, but I know him and his person, it's like, so I was like, that's a very good point. So I didn't want to see adult pictures. And I had other people look at it and they kind of also like give you a little bit of feedback. Like my mom was like, well, I like this guy. He kind of sounds like you. He's a physician. He seems very like thoughtful and measured. And Yeah, that seems good. And then what I'll tell people is at the end of the day, once you make the decision, like, I haven't really thought twice about it. Like, I mean, it's not something that like I go, what if I had chosen a different donor? Or da 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 da. It's like I never really think about that, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah,
you kind of
totally.
just once you've made the
Yeah.
decision and you've just kind of gone on, then like I have not like did I choose the right donor or not has never crossed my mind. And maybe that's just fortunate for me and that and how my kid has so far turned out. I mean, not she's 2, almost 3, like we got time. But but I think I had that like did I make the right decision on who to pick has never crossed my mind. Like it just doesn't even come up. So
Because you have your daughter and you love her,
exactly.
and if you had picked a different donor, you wouldn't have her, right? I
Yeah.
think that's probably a lot
Exactly.
of it.
Exactly. And like, even if you're trying to, I tell people, I'm like, even if you're trying to pick the perfect, you never know how the genes are going to parse out, and so even because like, I tell people like, at first I thought I wanted to pick a donor who looked like me and to find that it's just hard, to find that. Then plus like, I wanted them to have a professional degree and then one donor had like a family history of alcoholism. And I was like, that's just going to make me nervous. Not that most families probably don't have an alcoholic in their family, to be quite honest. However, I was like, that's not something like a gene you can test for, a test thing you can screen for or whatever. And I was like, I just feel like this is going to personally make me nervous. Whereas like my donor, actually, his grandmother had a history of breast cancer, surgically cured, not genetic, HER2, and I was like, that is something, and I fortunately do not have a family history of breast cancer or anything. So I was like, that is a quote that is fine. Like I can live with that because there's screening, all of that. Like I was like that I can live with that. But like if I had had a very strong family history of breast cancer, then I might have thought differently about that, or
Yeah.
personal history or any of that. So that like is kind of where I explain to patients like that's where you have to have your negotiables and non-negotiables. And that to me, I was like, that's something I can live with. Like, so that's kind of where I landed with that. And yeah, it's funny because I have 2 pictures of him, like 2. And so, and he's a physician. So in my head, like people are like, oh, do you ever want to meet him? I'm like, if it came up organically, I was like, there's only 2 things I really like. I want to know what kind of physician he is because in my head, he's either like emergency medicine or pathology. And I don't know why I'm like, or radiology, like someone who had time to donate sperm in residency. You know what I mean? And I was like, so I don't know why. The second is everyone is always like, she looks so much like you. She looks so much like you. Actually, if you see a picture of the donor, which she does look like me, and I'm like, is it the power of suggestion or like, but if you look at her in a picture of the donor, she looks like, I mean, it's kind of uncanny. And so I'm like, what does he look like now? Like, do we look alike now? So that's the other like thing that I think is just like interesting, but and like the nature versus nurture aspect of it, because I know she has half siblings, and then like if he had, kids of his own, like how did that play out? Just how did that play out? Just out of curiosity, not because like it matters or anything to me, but just mostly like, huh, like because from that the 2 pictures I have, she does look like him. From the pictures, like what do like how odd would it be if his kid, like this kid looked most like him, of like if he had his own, all that kind of stuff that you're like, just wild how genetics works. So
Yeah.
Genetics is crazy. I mean, first of all, I didn't know you could see adult pictures.
for some of them, not all of them.
And I think about that and like how wild that is just from a non-anonymity standpoint, especially with AI and stuff. At some point you'll be able to
Oh.
throw it in ChatGPT and it'll be like, this is John Smith and he lives at blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. And I tell patients now, I'm like, there is no such thing as genetic anonymity
Yeah.
anymore. Like
Yeah.
I am sure I did do an open, like it's open, so we can find out one day. And I think like probably like I would kind of want to know, just like out of like, again, I do not need to have a relationship with this person. Like that is not, just more like, yeah. Because now I have this invented story in my head of like what kind of doctor he is and all this stuff, and I'm like, I'm probably dead wrong, to be honest. And that's fine. And maybe he never has children of his own or whatever it is. Who knows? But yeah, I was kind of like, at the end, like there's no way, I mean, unless we just really did not tried hard. I was like, you can't, if you're being a donor and think you're never going to be found, you are kidding yourself in this day and age. And so I'm like, you know, who knows, like if she ever does 23andMe one day, she'll find him somehow if she really wants to, or her half siblings or something like that, so.
Yeah. I think this is something I think that comes up for a lot of people, right? Is like, how do you disclose, like, when, like, his scout started asking, like, I mean, I think society, like, you see mommy, daddy, right? Like,
Yes.
that's what social norms has out there, right? So, like, kids are going to start asking questions. And I think that's something single parents by choice have to navigate, is like, how do you disclose? When do you start telling people, like, or tell your
Yes.
child, like, how do you do
Yeah.
that? Like, have you navigated any of that?
So yes, a little bit, not quite a lot, but I know it's coming. So one time, it was probably like a year ago, someone else's, a friend's child asked me, "Where's Scout's dad?" And I just said, "He's not here." And that was fine enough. Yeah, I just said, "He's not here." And that was fine enough for them, because I was like, my kind of philosophy is to, especially because, like, okay, like, well, sometimes and then there's an egg and there's a sperm and all this stuff. Like, I was like, oh God, I don't want to be like, but I was like, maybe my kind of philosophy is to give, at least to other kids or other, not my own child, the simplest answer that satisfies them for the moment. Because my mom tells a story. I had a friend growing up whose father had ALS, unfortunately, and he was in a wheelchair. And I asked, "Why is your dad in a wheelchair?" I was like probably 4 or something. And my mom was like, "Oh my God, like, how am I going to explain this? Like, sometimes in life people have bad things happen to them. This is this awful thing." And the little girl goes to me, "Because he can't walk." And I was like, "Okay." And my mom was like, that was it. That's all she needed to know. And that was so for, that I think, like, my next is like, he's not here. That seems to placate little kids for now. Then that's not going, where is he? And like, well, she doesn't have, I think probably the thing is, if you just say she doesn't have one, I don't know. I don't know at what age kids start to put together that you need to tango type of thing. So then it's like,
Yeah.
and also, like, if the parents around, like, what do you want me to tell, like, for other people's kids? Because, like, I don't want to be explaining human reproduction to someone's kid that they aren't really ready for that, or however they want to disclose to their kid. For my own daughter, the funny thing is, like, she's actually never asked yet, but she has made references to, "I'm gonna call daddy," or whatever, and I'm like, "Oh, he'll be surprised." Yeah, that'll be quite the shock. So, because I think at school they talk about, like, mommy and daddy, or like we read books and there's daddy in it, whatnot. Surprisingly, I am shocked, honestly, that she has not asked. But I think, when she is older, she will not understand this now. But when she is older, I'll tell her, well, mommy really wanted to have you. And so she was willing to do this alone. She had to have some help from someone that she doesn't know. But you were so wanted that this, so you don't have you do, like, she has a biological other half, but like, that doesn't matter. You are very loved, blah, blah, blah. She's not going to understand that for a while, so, you know, I don't know what I'll tell her exactly at this age. Like, where is he? Well, he's not here. Like, it's just mommy, and sometimes, I mean, kids, it's hard when they start asking why, and then you're like, well, I'm sure we're just gonna have to get into human reproduction kind of early, but whatever. So, yeah, I haven't really thought beyond, like, just because at this age, for her to understand, like, how a baby is made. Maybe I'm underestimating her. I don't know. Maybe she'll be very precocious. I don't know. But I was like, but usually I just try and go with the simplest answer that's going to make the most sense to them at the age. And that I do think, like, for me, like, it's will be very obvious that she's donor conceived. Whereas, like, I do think that disclosure is probably hard. I don't want to say harder, but, like, if you're a heterosexual couple who had to use an egg or a sperm donor, for that to disclose, just because you are in that normative-ish normative relationship, that the kid, it might be much more shocking to them. Whereas, like, in this case, it's like, do you see a guy around? Yeah,
Yeah.
not one around here. So, yeah, so this is, it's a little bit more obvious. So, Yeah.
Do you think your role as a physician in this, field will help with explaining a little bit? Like, I would imagine at some point it'll come up more about this is what mommy does, rather than, and then at some point maybe she'll kind of, oh, well, maybe was that how I came
Yeah.
to do
Oh,
it?
I think it will definitely, because she already knows. Like, I ask, like, if you ask, well, depends on the day. But what does mommy do? What does mommy do when she goes to work? She helps the mommies and daddies have babies. And so, yes, so she like knows that. And so I definitely think, because she's gonna, once she starts hearing me take calls or has to come to the office because mommy's got to do an egg retrieval or an embryo transfer, like, I think that will be because that is going to be so much part of her life already,
Yeah.
that it will make understand, because I'll have to explain what I do for work and why I have to go, I think that will make that explanation much easier. Because then she'll be like, well, donor egg, all this, all gestational carrier, all this stuff, so I do think that will make it easier, just because it is going to be a huge part of her reality based on what I do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
she'll probably be explaining human reproduction. I'll probably get a call from school. Like, I'm imagining I will get a call from school one day, like, your daughter is explaining human reproduction to the entire class. I'll be like, ooh, sorry.
I mean, I always love showing my son, because I did IVF for both my kids. I love to show him his embryo picture. We don't have my
Yes.
we don't have my younger one, because they didn't do that
Yeah.
where I worked in
Mhm.
the second place. But the first one, I'm like, this is you. You were a ball of cells. This is what you
Yes.
look like.
Yeah, I have pictures of both, and I have, well, pictures of my eggs too. So I was like, I can really show them the process,
Yeah.
like, we don't know which egg was exactly yours, but it's one of these. And yes. And then actually, like, my best looking blast was was a male embryo, actually, but I was like, I remember when they sent me the picture, I was like, looks so good. I was like, that's like art worthy. Like, I could frame that and put it in my office. And I was like, I could tell them it's one of them. It's not. But I was like, that's like a crowning achievement of mine. Like, this is a really nice looking blast. I mean, they were good looking too, but but I was like, wow, that one's really nice. Yeah. Yeah.
I worked with a nurse previously, and she did IVF for her kids, and I just remember she was telling me this story. She used to joke, well, she jokes with her kids that they came from the freezer.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that all the time.
But I guess, like, I think it was one of her daughters, like, literally would go around telling people, like, I came out of a freezer.
Yeah, and you're like, well, not entirely. Like, you didn't come from the frozen tundra. Yes, I know. It is why. Yes, because I'm like, I'm sure she will say things that, like, will say it like Sally, but like, I came from the freezer. I came from the lab, and you're like, well, you did, but maybe don't say that out
Right.
loud to
Then you gotta, like,
people. Yeah,
explain it to, like, okay,
yeah,
not exactly that. I did IVF, blah
I
blah
wonder
blah.
what.
And
yeah,
it's just like how much do you then share
yes,
with these random people she's telling she's
yes,
came out of a
exactly.
freezer.
Yeah, like, she was once frozen. Yeah, so yeah, which is actually wild to think about. Like, when, like, I, like, know I do it every day, but then, like, when you see a picture of the embryo and then you see your child, you're like, that is wild that this works. Like,
Yeah.
that we can freeze this and then unfreeze it, and all. I'm like, that is just insane that it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is so cool.
I always like to, when maybe you can use this too. When my kids fight, I'm like, and the older one will be like, I'm older than you. I'm like, actually,
Actually, you're the
you're both the
same.
same age. Just one of you was thawed later than the other one.
Yeah, exactly. You're both, yeah, equal. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's a good one. I like that. I'm going to use that.
You have to
Yeah.
use, yeah, you'll have to use that. Yeah.
Yeah.
We were talking about this before we actually started hitting recording, was about, like, the insurance aspect of things. And of course, that's a whole nother episode. And we go down a whole like rabbit hole about
Yeah.
this, right? But, like, we were talking about, like, mandated states versus not. Obviously, Meggie and I are in Tennessee and Nashville. It's not a mandated state, far from it. And so, like, I can assume, and we just had this conversation, for Pride Month, talking about the LGBTQ plus community and having to navigate insurance aspects. I can imagine that navigating the insurance piece as a single parent by choice has to be fairly similar, because, again, insurance dictates a lot of, like, oh, you have to be trying for X amount of time before
Yeah.
we'll cover whatever. Like, I don't know if you encountered that, obviously being a physician working in the space, so a
Yeah,
little different,
you
but
get some work perks, I'll say.
yeah.
Yeah, so that is nice, I'll have to say. So I also have not. I think the other thing too that I tell people about my fertility, story, I guess, is like, I also did not have necessarily the financial stress of like they did egg freezing for us for very little cost when I was a fellow. And then, like I had to pay to ship my eggs here and I had to pay for like some meds and stuff. But like pharmacy reps would send me like, oh, you need PIO? We'll send it to you, like all this stuff. So it's like I was not having to have that stress of, oh my gosh, I put 20,000 into this and this has to work, which is a very I think that I tell people like a lot of times it's the finances that are really causing so much anxiety for patients, which I understand. Because I tell people like the best thing you can do going into an egg retrieval is being like, I get what I get and I don't get upset because that's what's going to happen. You're going to get what you get. That is a very hard pill to swallow when you're forking over 25 grand, or however much. So I think, yes, I think, actually, within some of the like specialty for insurances, like specialty fertility insurances, like the Progenies or Mavens or whatever, I don't know what the other, a lot of other names, but depending on how the employer negotiates with the company, like there are some single women that will have coverage, which is nice, or like for egg freezing, like some Progeny plans cover egg freezing, not all of them do. And like with those, it's kind of like you can use the benefit however you want within the realms of what they, what your employer has negotiated. The major medical insurances are harder because yes, even within like same-sex female couples, like, well, they can't try for a year, so yes, for a lot of single females, it is harder to navigate that piece of it because how do you, like to be able to prove to insurance, I'd say most of the time I would say it's out of pocket, which is a huge burden for people too, unfortunately. So, yeah. But hopefully, I mean, it'd be not, it would be, I also like having then also you get pregnant and you're like, dear God, how much does it have the cost to have a baby is kind of insane sometimes. The more you like work in healthcare or interact with the healthcare system, you're like, this is insane. Like I haven't met my deductible, so this is how much, I got my NIPT. I was looking through all the bills and whatnot. And my NIPT, it cost me nothing, but the company billed my insurance $4,399. Wow. And I was like, okay, maybe it does cost that much. However, I know good and well our carrier screen, right, that we do in our office, I tell patients, I say, hey, this is going to be run through your insurance. If it's covered by insurance, great. If it's not, look at the price because the cash price of this is $250 per person. So if your insurance is giving you some bill for $1,000, do not pay that, just pay cash. So I was like, this is why, yeah. I mean, I remember I was like, this is so messed up because I was like, maybe it does cost that much. I don't know. But I was like, I just can't imagine if our carrier screen costs $250 cash that my NIPT costs that much truly to do. But that's
the insane thing too with like fertility medications for people who don't have coverage or who have lifetime max for fertility treatments. If they bill them through insurance for the meds, it's like twice the amount. Versus just paying the self-pay cost. It's crazy.
That is a very hard concept to explain to people.
Yeah.
They're like, but I don't understand. I have coverage. I'm like, you do, but you are going to spend twice the amount.
Yes.
Because of how they've negotiated. But if you just self-pay through one of these pharmacies, it's actually going to be less money. And that's like, it does not make sense, but you're like, just trust me on this one. Like we do this all day, every day.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, that's why I tell them about the carrier screen. If through your insurance, they're telling you it costs $1,500, do not pay $1,500, pay $250,
Healthcare makes so much sense, guys.
Yeah. Every day I'm like, this is a racket. I'm like, this is a total racket. And that's another like thing I tell patients because a lot of the questions we'll get about like financial and insurance. I'm like, okay, here's the deal. I cannot control the American healthcare system. So like that ultimately, like I give that like in an IVF consult, I'm like, here is what it's going to cost if you had no insurance coverage and we're paying everything out of pocket. And we give them like average cost of medications and all this stuff. But then I was like, they're like, well, I have really good insurance. I'm like, you might think that. However, like it just depends. I'm like, what is your deductible? Do they cover? Because then they'll come back like, well, we don't cover assisted hatching or something like, whatever, all like this. I was like, it just can get very complicated, unfortunately. And that is not a problem I can fix at this moment. So, yeah.
Maybe sometime in our lifetime we'll see.
I hope so. Because also it's like, it's not fun as a practitioner as well, to be on, to then, because I tell people are like the conversation about private equity in our field and all this stuff. And I was like, well, yeah, that is, it's a double-edged sword. And like, oh, do they dictate how many patients you see? And I'm like, well, we still own our clinic, so that's a different. But I go like, honestly, the insurance companies are what dictate how many patients you have to see a day to turn a profit to keep the lights on, because of what they're going to reimburse you for different, And so I was like, really, at the end of the day, that's actually who dictates how we deliver healthcare, because I would rather my new patient visits all be an hour, so I could actually be, but they're 45 minutes because I've got to be able to pack in a certain amount of people to keep the lights on at the end of the day. Which is like because of how they and then they'll always come back, oh no, that was a level 4, not a level 5. And you're like, which is why I just do time-based billing now. It's because then if you try and argue medical complexity, well, they're like, well, she came to talk about egg freezing, but endometriosis wasn't why she came. And I'm like, so I should just be a bad doctor and not talk about her endo and how that is going to impact all of this, because you're telling me you're not going to pay me to talk about endo because that was not her chief complaint.
Oh man.
Which is terrible. Yeah.
I
was like, I can't talk to you about egg freezing only and not address this other large thing that's going to affect your reproductive future and the egg freezing process. But I'm like, so, it's like, but then I'm not going to get paid for this expertise that I have. Like, that's also messed up, it's very frustrating.
I can only imagine.
I appreciate you saying these things though, right? Because like Laura and I talk about it a lot, and we have these conversations on the podcast and with other people and stuff. But I really think it hits home coming from like physicians working in the space. Like I think we can all recognize there are gaps in care, and the system is broken, and all these things. And it's like, I think people in clinics like get blamed a lot. The providers get blamed a lot. Nurses get blamed a lot. Just because like it's easy to, but it's like the system is just not set up for giving the practitioner's success in actually treating patients and practicing medicine.
Yes. Well, because the other thing too is I tell like the biggest thing patients want with you is time. And that is, and like, there is no incentive to give people more time because you can't, because unless you are taking cash only is what I'll say. If you are a cash, which is why sometimes I'm like, that would just be easier. But in the same breath, I'm like, but that's not fair, because then you're only treating a certain population of people that can just pay. And like, sure, you can say like, I'll give you a super bill, you can be your insurance middleman, but like, who knows? But what pay, like honestly, probably an hour and a half for a new patient visit if you're going to be really, really, it depends on what it is. But like sometimes you're talking about genetic stuff and then their family history. Oh, you have a family history of breast cancer? 2 people? Did anyone ever talk to you about this? Like, do I need to refer you to genetics, talk about hereditary cancer screen? Like all these things that you feel should be addressed, but like you only have such limited time. And then when an insurance company comes back and tells you, well, she came in to talk about egg freezing, not about endo. So we're going to downgrade the visit and pay you less because they only came in to talk about egg freezing. And I'm like, well, that's just me. If I just did that, but then did not talk to her about her history of endo, how that could impact, then I'm just being a bad doctor. Like this is not like, I can't live with myself at the end of the day doing that, so, and if they don't want to take my advice, that's one thing. If I tell them all these things and they don't want to do anything with that information, I can't control that. But yeah, it's a very frustrating thing to be like, there is no incentive to be a quote thorough or good doctor, because then you get frustrated and you're like, well, why am I working so hard? And then I'm not going to get reimbursed for this, and and then you're like, yeah. And then like, exactly. You have to, at the end of the day, it is a business. You have to make enough money to keep the lights on and pay your staff and do all this stuff. I think people think it's like, so we can pay ourselves more. And it's like, no. Yeah. No. Yeah. I was like, overhead is quite high. Yeah. I was like, you got to meet all that first. So yeah.
I'm glad that we're having this conversation, because it is such a frustration for so many of us in the field who came into it to do good. And
yes,
what's dictating it is out of our control.
Completely.
I think
Completely.
it like then speaks to, or all the downstream things that happen from this is patients lose trust in their physicians, and then they're going to the internet, and
The
then the internet is
internet.
telling them that they need to do all this other stuff, and it just is like a giant cluster. You won't
Yes.
say the next word.
Yeah. Well, that's the heart is like, yeah, people want time with you is what they want. So then and I think when you spend time with people, they learn to trust you more. But then when you can't, they're like, it does make them feel, I think a lot of times patients think we're hiding some great secret from them. And I'm like, if I had the great secret, I would be very rich. And also every clinic in America would be doing the thing that I'm doing. Like if I had some secret, like people call, do you use embryo glue? Or something like that. I'm like, okay, it's just, it's in our media, but it's not the actual brand embryo glue. It's like hyaluron. So it is in there. But we don't have, and that's not like super, like trying, but I'm like, if there was one thing that increased your pregnancy rate 5%, everyone would do it, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I tell people. I'm like, if we're telling like an antihistamine protocol for a transfer, I tell people, listen, this is a very low-hanging fruit that is cheap and expensive. How much it's going to move the needle, not great data on it, but we can do it. But I don't want you to think that like we didn't do this last time and that's why it didn't work. It's like, probably not, or
Right.
no, I can, but let's try it this time. It's going to make us all feel better that we tried something different, and it's not going to cost you a ton of money, or crazy side effects. But like, yes, if that truly made a huge difference in pregnancy rates, every clinic in America would do it for every transfer.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I always say about pineapple and pomegranate juice and French fries. We'd all hand it to you as you left the transfer room, right?
Yes.
Like we'd
Yes.
still be putting patients in reverse Trendelenburg position
Yes.
after your FET cycle.
Exactly. I tell people like I ran 2 days after both of my transfers because I knew I was like, it's either worked or it's not by now. So, there, yeah. And I was like, again, at the end of the day, like I also, acknowledge I'm like, listen, like you have to use the regret test after a transfer is what I tell people. If you're going to regret doing that thing, if it doesn't work, then do not do it. But if you know that I'm telling you that the embryo is like a jelly seed in a peanut butter sandwich, it's not going to fall out, then, I say 24 hours, like take it easy, chill, and then like try and live your life.
Yeah.
But yes, it's like one of the frustrating parts is like, I think people think and then they go on TikTok and they're like, do you have silent endo or ureaplasma, your microbiome's off and all this stuff. And you're like, and they go down these rabbit holes and think you haven't been telling them about this. And it's like, no, like if I think someone has endo, I will tell them and be like, I think you need surgery. You can't leave your house when you have your period. That's not normal. You should have surgery. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Oh, I feel like we could keep talking about
this. We could keep talking about this exact conversation, but we are coming to the top of the hour. So we always ask everybody at the end of the episode of what would be sort of like your takeaway, or I guess in your instance too, like what would be the one thing, like hindsight looking back, that you learned that you're like, man, I wish everybody knew this at the beginning of the process. Like what would be like your sort of like takeaway for people who are maybe considering single parenthood by choice?
Yeah. Or what I tell a lot of people or patients and friends or anyone who asks me is a couple things. Number one, like fertility is not forever, and periods do not mean parenthood necessarily. And so, and like your fertility declines sooner than you probably think. So you have to, like, people have family planning for contraception. If having a family is important to you, you need to think about it also in the reverse. So, that's one thing I tell people. Also, giving yourself options is, I tell people, like, the saddest people or angriest people kind of I see are patients who do not like the options that they have. And they're also not liking the reality of biology that I'm telling them, and so giving yourself options. Sure, you may never need to use the eggs or whatever it is, but you will not regret having options. If that's like, if having biologically related children is a non-negotiable for you in your early 30s, you need to start planning for that. The other thing is, like, for single motherhood, again, it's like being very honest with yourself about the other thing too is like, if anyone waited for the right time to have children, no one would have children. You will never have enough money or time or whatever that is. But, if it's something you do think you want and can do, you will figure it out. Go for it. Because if that is something that is important to you. But I also tell patients when they come in, I'm like, if you don't think you want to have children, that's also important to know about yourself too, because, having children is not an easy thing. And you can still be a very valuable member of your family and society and a child's life outside of biologic parenthood. So I think those are kind of my main messages to people is like, you really again, life is about choices and planning at some point. And so, yes, I think a lot of people want to say like, oh, I'm just waiting for the right person. And that's fine. But also acknowledge the reality that if that doesn't happen, like you should have a plan, And so, and then with single parenthood, ultimately, like I have no regrets. And there are people who are like, I wish I did what you did. So just take that for what it's worth.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on here
You're
and
welcome.
for having this conversation. I can vouch for you. Everybody should have a conversation with you. So if anybody is looking for a wonderful, fantastic doctor in the Nashville area, or willing to travel to Nashville to meet with her, where can people find you? How can people work with you? All those things.
Yes. So I work at Nashville Fertility Center, and we have several offices around Nashville. And I will say, like, it's like after living in New York City where there's a fertility clinic on every corner, seemingly. I think there's only 8 or 9 clinics in all of Tennessee, which is kind of crazy. So I will say, like, even if you're not in Nashville, like we do a lot of telehealth. Like I have patients who live like 4 hours away, and we also have licenses in our surrounding states so we can serve those patients. On Instagram, I'm at MBS. That's my initials. Thanks. And I probably should change it at some point. Just to make it easier. That's like from many moons ago. I don't know when years ago. And otherwise, yes, I would say like other good like options for patients who are considering, there is a podcast called Single Greatest Choice. Admittedly, I have not listened to that much of it at some point, but I do find like sometimes I tell people you can't be what you can't see. So sometimes listening to some other people that have done what you do makes it seem more tangible.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you again so much it was good chatting. Thank you for being on here. Congratulations in advance because number 2 is very soon. So can't wait to hear about all that and meet the new little one at some point. But yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. And for our listeners, as always, like, subscribe, share, comment. We'd love to hear from you, ask questions. And we will talk to you next week.
We'll see you next week.
If this conversation resonated, like, comment, or subscribe, share, send us your questions. Nothing is off limits.
And wherever you are in your journey, know this: you deserve support that's real and human. Never forget to ask your questions, advocate louder, and remember, you're not crazy. Fertility is hard.
That's it for today's episode of Fertility Nurses Unfiltered. Thanks for spending your time with us today.
We'll see you next time.